Now in our 26th year, a quarter century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1367, with a release and air date of Saturday, May 10th, 2025. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone. Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and podcast on the Internet since 1993, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1368, our Dayton Hamvention special edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. The ARRL renews defense of the 902 to 928 MHz amateur radio band. The International Amateur Radio Union considers consolidation, eliminating regional entities. We will take a look at the Dayton Hamvention. The ARRL seeks technician class entry-level HF privileges in its latest proposal to the FCC. South Carolina and several other states will be a hands-free driving state later this year. A Florida broadcast pirate agrees to pay a large FCC fine in installments. The next generation of DXing track videos are now available from the ARRL over on YouTube. Chinese researchers design a compact, high-performance antenna. The FCC has a webinar coming up strictly for senior Americans. Amazon kicks off its Kuiper network, Internet from Space, with an ambitious launch. The ARRL has posters available to promote your field day operations. And the Amateur Radio Society of Bangladesh held an amateur radio exam session. 900 candidates showed up to take the test. We will have the details coming up in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will present a brief introduction to the ham-sci community. Our own amateur radio historian Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us aboard the Wayback Machine to the early 1920s, where we find that at age 29, and already one of the most well-known radio engineers in the world, Edwin H. Armstrong was a veteran of the Great War and the president of the Radio Club of America. This week's edition is entitled Armstrong NQST. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyer's AJ8B in the DX Corner with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and a lot more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio facility just outside the capital of New York State, Albany, New York, I'm George W2XBS.
And reporting from our bureau in Dallas, Texas, where it might not be summertime yet, but we're getting close to 100 degrees, I'm Tammy, KI5ODE.
And reporting from gloomy Naugatuck, Connecticut, where we're expecting thunderstorms. It could get severe this afternoon. I'm Steve Sawyer, K1FRC.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Albany, New York, in the Geek Cave studios, back from a long recovery after surgery, I'm Rich Lawrence, KB2MOB.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
And reporting this week from our news bureau in Cortlandville, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And from the sunny Space Coast in Florida, I'm Ed Johnson, W2PH.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
And reporting from our New York News Bureau, where it's sunny and warm, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our soggy, rain-soaked Catskill Mountains ham radio outpost, where it's time to start building an ark, because it's not going to let up anytime soon. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, where we have been dodging rain, hail, and lightning with an occasional glimpse of the sun and watching everything turning nice and green.
Leading off our news this week, ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, in a recent filing encouraged the Federal Communications Commission to listen to industry stakeholders about the detrimental impacts that changes to the 902 to 928 MHz band would have for current users. John Ross, KD8IDJ, starts off our coverage of the story.
The FCC is considering a petition by NextNav Incorporated, a licensee in the 900 MHz location and monitoring service, LMS, to reconfigure the 902-928 MHz band to obtain more spectrum for itself and replace the LMS with high-powered 5G cellular and related positioning, navigation, and timing (PNT) services that would supplement GPS. ARRL filed comments opposing NextNav's proposal in September of 2024. ARRL's latest filing was submitted on May 13, 2025 by the association's Washington Council in response to an inquiry initiated by the Commission to consider more broadly ways to improve and harden GPS. ARRL's response echoes concerns of many others and underscores the need to improve and harden the GPS system in a manner that doesn't impact radio amateurs and other users of the 902-928 MHz band. The band supports an extraordinary number of unlicensed consumer devices, such as consumers both inside and outside of the United States, with which radio amateurs coexist. You can read more and see the entire filing at arrl.org. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
ARRL strongly agrees with the many parties that point out in the record of this proceeding that, in working with its sister federal agencies on this issue, one of the Commission's primary goals should be to ensure that existing services already operating in the spectrum, such as in the crowded 902 through 928 MHz band, should not be disrupted by complementary PNT if equal or better means are available. Many billions of unlicensed devices are in use to provide hundreds of applications and functionalities to the American public, and the number of devices and the functionalities that they provide continue to grow. These devices coexist with amateur radio operations in the 902 through 928 MHz band, but they, as well as amateur radio operations, would be displaced if a 5G-like PNT service was authorized to use this spectrum. In the instant proceeding, the FCC addresses GPS concerns holistically that are also being addressed by multiple other federal government agencies under the direction of the President. ARRL emphasized the FCC's expertise and role in making the best use of the spectrum resource. We commend the Commission for initiating this proceeding to take a holistic approach to the problem and possible solutions thereto, rather than a piecemeal approach that might have led to systems that would unnecessarily use valuable spectrum with inferior results and take years longer to construct from scratch. The Commission is the civilian spectrum expert among the collection of agencies that are addressing this issue. We rely on the Commission to make clear the value of each megahertz of spectrum and the trade-offs in designating any particular band for the purpose of complementary PNT. ARRL's filing is intended to emphasize the public interest in protecting amateur and others' access to the 902 through 928 MHz band, and to highlight that other, less disruptive options are available for PNT. ARRL will continue to defend amateur access to this and other threatened amateur allocations.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
The International Amateur Radio Union, marking 100 years of representing member countries around the world and coordinating frequencies and other concerns, the organization enters its second century with one big change on its mind: consolidation. Imagine for a moment an IARU without separate entities known as Region 1, Region 2, and Region 3. Imagine a total restructuring that would create a single global entity erasing the discrete regions separated by oceans, languages, and cultures. The International Amateur Radio Union has announced that it is considering just that and has released a proposal to unite the independent regions as one, combined with the International Secretariat to streamline decision-making, to better coordinate shared concerns, and to bolster membership in regions where it is declining. The IARU's administrative headquarters is presently based at the ARRL in the United States. The IARU has released guidance on potential restructuring to help the organization meet modern challenges. The proposed challenges would combine the three separate regional organizations into a single global entity. The proposal outlines a number of areas where the currently independent regional organizations struggle. Problem areas including declining membership, duplication of resources, lack of coordination, and other various inefficiencies. The changes are designed to establish a number of benefits: global representation, streamlined decision-making, better allocation of resources, improved communication, long-term sustainability, centralized finances, and greater influence. Member societies will vote on the restructuring with the potential for a transition as early as next year. This overwhelming change would not happen overnight, of course. The IARU will be asking member societies to vote after they received the consultation on restructuring, which is available on the IARU website. Any changes that are approved would not take place before next year. The full consultation and restructuring PDF is available on the International Amateur Radio Union website.
Trucks being unloaded, tables being arranged, boxes being opened, and even tablecloths being ironed. All those were among the sights and sounds Thursday at Ohio's Greene County Fairgrounds as hundreds of ham radio manufacturers, retailers, clubs, and organizations prepared for Friday's opening of the 2025 Dayton Hamvention. To the eye, it was organized chaos, but the word we heard most frequently among vendors and visitors was anticipation. Inside exhibits, volunteer Rob Lindsay, W5MRL, drew a mental picture for us. Early in the day, he said there's a flurry of activity from hundreds of vendors setting up their booths in anticipation of all the visitors they'll see on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We are already seeing visitors from around the world, including Japan, the UK, Germany, and Italy. As a volunteer, it's interesting and a great way to give back to the hobby, but the most important part is interacting with the visitors and vendors and making their visit enjoyable. ARRL Great Lakes Division Director Scott Yonley, N8SY, said some of the chaos is internal. You know in your mind how you want to set it up, but then you get here and say, I can do this or I can do that. You have to be flexible to make changes while staying true to your basic plan. It's utter chaos. But for other exhibitors, it's all part of a well-oiled process. Ham radio outlet president Robert Ferrero, W6RJ, said setup day is the culmination of a 2 or 3 month process of planning and hard work. This is just 5 to 6 hours of finalizing all that hard work. We're fortunate that we have a great team to make it all happen. Lori Hicks of Flex Radio noted that we come in as early as Tuesday. We look forward to setup time, which leads to the excitement of the opening of the show. It's more than just setting up our booth, it's thinking about how our customers will interact with us. There are always weeks of preparation before the event. She added, Dayton, for us, is the venue to do new product announcements. We hope to come out with a successful new product launch. Also, the opportunity to meet with customers. It's all about relationships. New products were also on the mind of Icon America National Sales Director Ray Novak, N9JA. The biggest thing at the show for us is having the IC7760 functional for the first time, he said. We're demonstrating it with the new PW2 amplifier and remote software, so you can run a kilowatt from anywhere in the world where you have an internet connection. DX Engineering Sales Manager Scott Jones, N3RA, was also focused on new additions to their lineup, along with something much bigger. Setup has gone really well, he said, with lots of new products. We're also pleased to have the Roman Gladiator with us, fully equipped and on display. He's referring to a customized Jeep with radios for various services, but focusing on amateur gear. And finally, kit building forum moderator Joe Eisenberg, K0NEB, who had the benefit of being on hand without having to set up a booth, wrapped up the feeling of the day this way. Thursday is always a great day of anticipation, seeing all the goodies come in the door. The booths being set up and seeing friends who I sometimes only see once a year. This is a great day to look forward to.
Friday was opening day at 2025 Dayton Hamvention, and it was a day of superlatives. Huge crowds coming through the gates, standing room only at Salty Walt Hudson's Portable Antenna Forum, and more as hams from across the country and around the world descended on the Greene County Fairgrounds in Xenia, Ohio, for the first of 3 days of total immersion in all things ham radio. At the many booths that make up the ARRL Expo area, crowds were constant and sentiments were similar among employees, board members, and volunteers who staffed them. ARRL CEO David Minster, NA2AA, was in the meet and greet area and talked with ARRL members nearly nonstop the whole day. At the Amateur Radio Emergency Services booth, ARRL Director of Emergency Management Josh Johnston, KE5MHV, said, "It's busy. I love it. Hamvention is an awesome opportunity to talk to hams, find out what's going on in the field, and share ideas," adding, "It's a unique opportunity to hear about problems and successes and try to help get issues resolved." He also noted that informal conversations with influential visitors can often have far-reaching benefits. Across the aisle at the ARRL Foundation booth, Development Operations Manager Christy Lessard, KC1TDM, said she enjoyed connecting with clubs that have received club grants and answering questions about scholarship programs. Lessard added that it's exciting to talk about all the good that the foundation does for the amateur radio community. Development Director Kevin Beal, K8EAL, noted that the Diamond Club has been especially exciting this year because of the ARRL sweepstakes for an ICOM Dream Station and that a Diamond Club donation results in an automatic sweepstakes entry. He also pointed out that donors to the ARRL Spectrum Defense Fund receive a special mug and pin, adding that it's never been more important to protect our spectrum. The ARRL Lab booth had a steady stream of visitors who wanted to see if their handheld radios were up to FCC specs on spurious signal suppression. Engineers Rick Cerrivo, W1CIE, John McAuliffe, W1DRF, and Matthias Zabaka, AJ4BB, had tested nearly 4 dozen radios by midday. Their favorite test radio today was an ICOM ID50 that had been accidentally dropped 14,000 feet and not only survived the fall in working condition, but still passed the spectral purity test. Overall, noted McAuliffe, it was nice to have one-to-one with members who don't normally have direct contact with the lab. The ARRL Youth League was busy all day, and the kids were loving it, according to Education and Learning Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, who pointed out that the young visitors were building code keys from 3D printed kits and testing them out by sending messages. Saturday will feature a youth rally with multiple activities. There's also a raffle for young hams sponsored by DX Engineering, Gigaparts, Chat Radio, Zumspot, and Bengali Keys. There were also meetups with book authors, including Repeater Books' Garrett Dew, KD6KPC, whose data now powers the ARRL repeater directory, and Salty Walt's portable antenna sketchbook author, Salty Walt Hudson, K4OGO, whose book-based forum earlier in the day had drawn a standing room-only crowd. "What you saw in that forum," said Hudson, "is where hams are today. What I try to do is simplify things, go out, try, do, make mistakes. That's what my YouTube channel is all about." Hamvention will continue today, Saturday, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, will provide daily coverage at ARRL.org.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
It's not just broadcasters who are getting their say in the FCC's delete deregulation initiative. The National Association for Amateur Radio has also filed comments advocating for modernization of Part 97, the Amateur Radio Service Regulations. Their proposals include both previously submitted items and new requests that the ARRL said is centered on updating the rules to reflect technological advancements while preserving the foundations of traditional amateur radio practices. The soldering iron and discrete physical components used in past experiments often are replaced by a personal computer and a coding knowledge to experiment with new techniques and functions, the ARRL wrote. The ARRL said that while digital technologies like FT8, RTTY, and PSK31 have become integral to the amateur radio service, entry-level technician class license privileges have not been updated accordingly. It advocates for granting technicians access to HF frequencies where digital modes are prevalent, which it says is crucial for introducing newcomers to the fundamentals of low-power communication and fostering self-training and emergency communication skills. The youth attracted to amateur radio today will become the wireless engineers and space scientists of tomorrow that are critical to our nation's future if given a chance, the ARRL wrote. The ARRL references a February 2018 petition on this matter that has yet to see any action. Their specific requests include phone privileges in the 3.9 to 4 MHz range, the 7.225 to 7.3 MHz range, and the 21.350 to 21.450 MHz bands, as well as RTTY and digital privileges within current technician allocations on the 80, 40, and 15-meter bands. The ARRL also noted that increasing use of digital modes is leading to an imbalance within the 80 and 75-meter amateur bands. To improve spectrum efficiency and better accommodate the demand for digital modes, the association refers to their 2016 petition requesting adjustments to the subband boundaries. Specifically, it proposed shifting the lower edge of the phone band upward to 3.65 MHz, allowing RTTY data in the 3.5 to 3.65 MHz range, aligning the ACDS subband with international practices at 3.6 to 3.615 MHz, and granting novice and technician licensees CW, RTTY, and data privileges in the 3.6 to 3.65 MHz segment, with general and advanced licensees also gaining access to this segment. The ARRL reiterated its support for the FCC's ongoing further notice of proposed rulemaking that Radio World reported on in 2023 to eliminate baud rate and bandwidth limitations on specific amateur LF and VHF and UHF bands. It noted the widespread support for this change among commenters. Additional areas of interest in the ARRL filing include deleting obsolete digital code limitations. It proposes allowing amateurs to freely experiment with new, publicly documented, and decodable digital codes. Deleting amplifier drive limitations. The ARRL requests the removal of the 15 dB gain limit for HF amplifiers. It argues this rule, originally intended to prevent CB misuse, is now obsolete due to advancements in solid-state amplifier technology and restricts efficiency for U.S. amateurs. Deleting obsolete identification requirements for special call signs. The ARRL seeks to remove the requirement for operators using special event call signs to identify hourly with their assigned call sign. Implementing World Radio Conference 03 third-party rule changes. The ARRL calls for aligning FCC rules with the 2003 World Radio Telecommunication Conference updates regarding third-party communication. The association points out that despite the international agreement removing the need for bilateral treaties for most third-party communications, the FCC still requires such agreements, hindering cross-border communication and emergency training. Summing up, the league says the technology has changed dramatically in the amateur radio domain, as it has in most other communication services, and the above requested rules, deletions, and modifications will foster the regulatory goals for the amateur service and continue to increase the amateur's historical experimentation, and service in meaningful ways, the ARRL concluded.
In recognition of Older Americans Month, the Federal Communications Commission's Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau will host a webinar on Thursday, May 22nd from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, highlighting how staying connected can empower older Americans to flip the script on aging. During the webinar, attendees will be provided with information about connectivity as a tool to prevent social isolation, telehealth resources, virtual volunteer opportunities, hearing aid compatibility for telecommunications, and captioning information and resources. After registering, you'll receive a confirmation email containing information about joining the webinar. The presentation slide deck will be shared with attendees after the webinar. ASL interpreters and captioning will be provided. Other reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities are available upon request. You can contact the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau at fcc504@fcc.gov or at area code 202-418-050. Requests should be made as early as possible. Questions about the webinar or to schedule a meeting to discuss how to collaborate with the FCC on providing information to your community can be emailed to outreach@fcc.gov.
The 2025 ARRL Field Day will be here before you know it. We're just 7 weeks away from Ham Radio's biggest event, held each year on the fourth full weekend of June, which this year is the 28th and 29th for 2025. With more details on materials the League is offering this year to help you promote your club's Field Day, we go to League headquarters and John Ross, KD8 IDJ.
The theme of Radio Connects highlights the many ways that amateur radio makes connections. As amateur radio operators, we know the excitement of the weekend. It's part getting together, part emergency communications exercise, and part operating event. It's also amateur radio's time to shine and welcome the public to learn about and experience this wonderful hobby. A major aspect of any successful ARRL Field Day operation is the publicity and outreach. How can the public learn about the event if they don't know it's happening? Well, the ARRL Public Relations and Outreach Committee recently held a publicity workshop for public information volunteers. One of the tools presented is the 2025 ARRL Field Day poster. It can be posted around your area, like libraries, bulletin boards, community centers, etc., with your event information filled right in on it. The 11 by 17 poster is available as a free PDF download or available for purchase in packs of 25 from the ARRL store. It tells the story of amateur radio as a fun hobby, resource for public service, and a tool for inspiring the next generation of technical leaders by providing a hands-on sandbox where students can gain experience in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. ARRL Public Relations and Outreach Manager Sierra Harrop, W5DX, says now is a great time to plaster those posters around your community. The summer tends to be a busy time with weddings, travel, and other activities. Get your club's ARRL Field Day activities in front of people now with the posters so they can plan to be there. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
ARRL Public Relations and Outreach Manager Sierra Harrop, W5DX, says now is a great time to plaster the posters around your community. The summer tends to be a busy time with weddings, travel, and other activities. Get your club's ARRL Field Day activities in front of people now with the posters so they can plan to be there. Check out all the resources for ARRL Field Day at www.arrl.org/fieldday.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Soon, South Carolina will join other states as a hands-free driving state, with cell phone use banned altogether while driving. The South Carolina Hands-Free and Distracted Driving Act has been passed by the House and was signed on Monday by Governor Henry McMaster. The bill makes it illegal to use any mobile electronic device while driving. The law will take effect September 1, 2025. but during the first 180 days after the law takes effect, officers will only issue warnings for violations. According to H. 3276, a mobile electronic device means a cell phone, portable computer, GPS receiver, electronic game, or any substantially similar standalone electronic device used to communicate, display, or record digital content. Of course, this does not include the use of citizens' band radio, amateur radio, commercial two-way radio or its functional equivalent, subscription-based emergency communication device, or prescribed medical device. So everyone out there with a 9-foot antenna on their truck is still okay. Drivers will be prohibited from holding or supporting a mobile device with any part of the body. This does not prohibit the use of an earpiece or device worn on the wrist used for voice-based communication. Reading, writing, or sending any form of text, including but not limited to a text message, email, application interaction, or website information on a mobile electronic device is prohibited. Watching motion, including but not limited to a video, movie, game, or video call on a mobile electronic device. However, it is still legal to use your phone while legally parked or stopped, reporting an accident, emergency, or safety hazard to a public official, or performing official duties as a first responder. The bill states that drivers are also allowed to use their phone or electronic device for navigation, listening to audio-based content, or obtaining traffic or road condition information in a manner that doesn't require the driver to type. Penalties for not obeying the law will be a $100 fine for the first offense, then a $200 fine and 2 points assessed to the driver's license for a second offense within 3 years of the first offense. Also, officials say that you cannot be arrested for this summary offense unless you fail to appear in court. Meanwhile, a similar law takes effect on the 5th of June in Pennsylvania, where drivers will be banned from using handheld mobile devices while behind the wheel of a moving car. As with many distracted driving laws passed recently, this law also exempts amateur radio operators and emergency responders. The measure is known as Paul Miller's Law, bearing the name of the 21-year-old man struck and killed by a motorist distracted by a phone in 2010. And finally, in this story, a similar law in Iowa, also with a ham radio exemption, is set to take effect on the 1st of July, joining a growing number of states around the U.S.
A longtime pirate radio operator in South Florida has agreed to stop broadcasting and pay an $11,000 penalty to the FCC's Enforcement Bureau through a 20-year consent decree. Wilfred Solomon was found to be operating Radio Ideal, an unlicensed FM station in and around Broward County, Florida, targeting the Haitian community. Miami field office agents visited locations in the county from which Solomon broadcast in 2017, 2018, and 2023. Solomon agreed to a penalty of $11,000 paid in $500 monthly installments. He'll face an additional penalty of approximately $350,000 if he violates the decree during the 20-year consent period by committing another pirate radio offense or missing a payment. On 3 separate dates in 2023, the Commission found that Solomon operated the station on 87.9 FM from a location on Northwest 21st Street in Lauderdale Lakes. Its signal exceeded Part 15 limits. The Commission issued Solomon a notice of apparent liability in 2024 regarding the operation. The NAL proposed a forfeiture of approximately $350,000. Based on Solomon's history, the Commission decided that the proposed penalty deemed an upward adjustment. Prior to the 2020 passage of the Pirate Act, the maximum penalty for pirate operations was $151,000. According to the Commission's account, Radio Ideal also operated on 107.1 FM. In 2017, agents visited the properties in Oakland Park and Lauderhill, from which the station broadcast, and issued Solomon a notice of unauthorized operation. U.S. Marshals and officers from the Lauderhill Police Department seized radio equipment at the address Radio Ideal operated from in October of 2018, but the signal returned to the airwaves from Lauderdale Lakes and was observed by agents 5 years later. Solomon responded to the Commission's 2024 NAL, stating that he was unable to pay the proposed amount. Afterwards, a Bureau field agent determined that the station was no longer operating. Given Solomon's claim of financial hardship and that the station went off the air, the Commission determined a consent decree with a reduced penalty was appropriate. The Media Bureau will conclude its investigation as a result.
The FCC has announced that the Office of Management and Budget has approved, for 3 years, the information collection requirement of the Commission's March 29th report and order that spelled out amateur radio service rules for the 2 new U.S. bands, 630 meters and 2200 meters. Notice of the action is now in the Federal Register. Before using either band, stations must notify the Utilities Technology Council that they plan to do so, and if UTC does not respond within 30 days, they may then commence operation.
ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, has published an 8-video series about the next generation of DXing. The all-day seminar was captured at the 76th International DX Convention held April 11th through the 13th, 2025 in Visalia, California. It featured expert panelists with deep knowledge of the current state of the art in the DXpedition world. The group of panelists covered everything from financing and planning of a DXpedition to getting permits, arranging logistics, planning out equipment, managing both remote and local operators, dealing with problems, and much more. The latest technology being used in DXpeditions was explained in detail, including the radio in a box, Starlink, software-defined radios, and the latest digital modes such as FT8 Superfox. The content is available on the ARRL HQ YouTube channel as a playlist. ARRL provided the video equipment and staff to record and produce the content, but it was created by the thought leader panelists.
This story is all about electronics that are made for the U.S. market but tested overseas. The U.S. regulator is preparing to change where the testing can and cannot be done. The FCC plans to tighten its requirements for testing of electronic devices made in countries such as China before they can be sold to U.S. consumers. The Commission will review an order this month that bans device testing conducted by labs that are, quote, owned or controlled directly by entities that pose national security risks, according to a statement by FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr. He identified China as one example of such a country. He said it was important that U.S.-based laboratories begin to take on the responsibility to certify such equipment. According to Carr's statement, Chinese labs test about 3/4 of all electronics sold in the U.S. The Commission will consider the new order at its open meeting on May 22nd.
The Radio Society of Great Britain participated in the International Amateur Radio Union Region 1 interim meeting in Paris last weekend. The event was of particular historical significance as it coincides with the centenary of the founding of the IARU in 1925, as well as the 75th anniversary of the establishment of IARU Region 1 in 1950. The French host society is also marking its 100th anniversary. This year's meeting in Paris reflected a broader scope than in previous years and for the first time includes youth matters on the agenda. It also covers the usual focus areas of HF, VHF, UHF, and microwave, and also electromagnetic compatibility. The RSGB has been a key contributor to the meeting, submitting papers that include future options for the 23-centimeter band and for the harmonization and protection of HF bands. 3 delegates from the RSGB attended the meeting, including newly appointed RSGB President Bob Beebe, GU4YOX. The meeting served as both a celebration of amateur radio's rich heritage and a forward-looking forum to address the challenges and opportunities facing the global amateur radio community. In celebration of IARU's centenary, the RSGB has created a web page to show information about its part in the celebrations. This included a link to an RSGB archive video from the IARU meeting in Paris in 1950, as well as the RSGB's July 1925 TNR bulletin that contains an announcement detailing the formation of the IARU. Meanwhile, we say congratulations to Barry Lewis, G4SJH, who was given the IARU Diamond Award at the IARU R1 interim meeting in Paris. The award is given to an IARU volunteer of long standing who has provided services over a significant number of years and has shown exceptional diligence during a long period of service. In addition to his work for the IARU, Barry volunteers as the RSGB Microwave Manager. Still with IARU news, the International Amateur Radio Union, which has just marked the 100th anniversary of its founding, is using the occasion to look within and to consider a way it can be restructured. The IARU's Administrative Council has released a consultation containing an overview and a number of proposals. Region 2, which covers North, Central, and South America, will be hosting 2 informal meetings on the Zoom platform where Region 2 societies can discuss the document, ask questions, or recommend changes early May.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX as part of Ham Radio's oldest ham radio magazine on the air, This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Bill, AJ8B. If you're watching this on YouTube, the text of this will be included in the show notes, so you won't have to worry about dates and times and URLs and call signs. I received the following email from Tim, N9 Papa November. Hello, Bill. I submitted for my 10-meter DXCC on April 22nd, and a week later, under my application, it shows that it finished. Next up is 15 and 20 meters, 7.3s, Tim, N9PN. Well, congratulations, Tim. Keep me in the loop and let me know how the chase on 15 and 20 are going. And don't forget 12 meters. That's another great band, and you're not going to get it in a few years, so you should chase it now. But well done. Each week, I'm trying to focus on those entities that will be available in the next 7 days. There's so much data to sift through that I thought a focus on the next week might be helpful. So here's what should be coming on. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. The Cape Verde operation is QRV. Delta 44 Tango Whiskey Oscar, Harold, and Delta 44 Zulu Zulu India, Warren, are on Santiago Island in Cabo Verde. They are prepared to activate 160 meters through 6 meters, CW sideband and digital modes. Neither station will have an amplifier as power on the island is inadequate to support amplifiers. The antennas are a vertical for 160 through 30, a buddy hex beam on 10 through 20 meters, and a 4-element beam on 6. Special emphasis will be placed on the less commonly worked bands according to Club Log. Harold will operate mainly CW while Warren will focus on sideband. Both will operate on digital modes to ensure that as many operators as possible have a chance to make QSOs. They are bringing a Starlink Mini and hope that this will enable reliable use of Club Log live stream utility. While QSOs will be uploaded to Club Log in real time, QSL arrangements are exclusively through Charles M0OXO. Per Kilo Bravo 2 FMH, James, the 3 Yankee 0 Kilo team met recently in Oslo, Norway for the first team development workshop and equipment shakedown. They are in great spirits and are having fun setting up some of the tents that they will use for stations and quarters. The larger tents, as used during the 3Y0 Juliet adventure, are supplied by Arctiv Lavo, and the smaller ones for sleeping are provided by Barents Outdoor. The team would like to especially thank the German DX Foundation for their very generous donation of 10,000 euros. Another supporter, DX World, supplied the ready-to-eat MREs that will feed them on the island for lunch, and then they sat for a nice dinner after a productive day's work. Antennas will be built and tested for proper tuning before being packaged for shipping. This saves a lot of time once they land with all antennas marked before packing, along with the required tools needed to assemble them quickly as the stations are built in Cape Phi in February of 2026. Yeah, it seems like a long way off, but it's less than a year now. To learn more about Bouvet and make your donations, please visit 3y0kilo.com and click the donate button. Every contribution helps offset the tremendous cost for this great adventure. And if you can do it, $10, $15, $20, it will make a difference. To celebrate the 77th anniversary of the State of Israel and the Israeli Association of Radio Communication, special call sign prefixes 4 X-ray 77 and 4 Zulu 77 will be active on the air through May 30th. Don't miss this opportunity to work a special 77 prefix and join the celebration. Zoo
PG5 Delta Oscar Norway has resumed operations under the call sign P29 X-Ray Zulu from Papua New Guinea, utilizing an FT-897 transceiver and a 750V antenna. He will intermittently operate on the following frequencies: 14.074, 21.074, 28.074, and 50.313 MHz. QSL cars should be directed to EA5 GL. C37 JPE from Andorra is QRV through the end of the month from the Union de Radioaficionados Andorrans Club. The special call sign is for Jacques del Petits Estates d'Europa, or the Games of the Small States of Europe. The games are in Andorra from May 26 to the 31. QSL Bureau or direct. And you can tell by the things that I include in this area that I really like working these special event stations and collecting the QSL cards. I hope you do too. HB0/DL2 SBY Casimir will be on until May 18th from Liechtenstein on all the HF bands with verticals and an inverted V, as well as 6 meters with a 5-element Yagi. No bureau is via LOTW or direct DL2 SBY, and that would be a really good catch on 6 meters. Well, the big DX news for the last week or so has been from the Prince Edward and Marian's Islands ZS8W, who is QRV. They informed the Daily DX that he's been active on 160 beginning around 2100 Zulu, but had a QRT around midnight local time after making some 117 contacts from Europe and Japan on FT8 due to antenna failures. He plans to be QRV all day today and tonight with a return to 160 meters on 1.832 megahertz. Then it will be off the air for up to 3 days before being QRV again. So that has passed and he actually is QRV again. His plans to be on the air until May 15th, which is when the ship is expected to arrive at Marian Island. Eurus reports heavy winds constantly, which have been causing his SWR to go high, which then shuts down the amp. Eurus has uploaded the most recent QSOs as of 2117 Zulu May 5th. Club log as of May 5th is showing 14,706 QSOs. And there was an email that came out literally a few minutes ago indicating that he's only going to be on the air till May 12th. So it's possible by the time you get around to listening to this that he's already done. And I hope not. I really haven't been able to hear him very much. From the Ohio Penn DX Bulletin, I have the following. In the city of Reims, France, on May 7th, 1945, at 2:41 a.m., the unconditional surrender of the German armed forces was signed, thus ending the Second World War in Europe. For this occasion, a group of OMs from Marne, the department, will use special call sign TM45END in May from the 7th to the 11th, 14th to the 18th, and then from the 21st to the 25th. They will be active on all bands and modes, and you can QSL that via F5JYD with details on QRZ.com. Again, another really excellent special event opportunity. Best regards, and that was from Jean-Michel, F6AJA. The most recent DX Mentor YouTube episode is available this weekend. Dan, KB6NU, was the guest. He talked about his blog, his mission statement, and all of the training materials that he has developed, as well as the successful classes he's given. If you're interested in DX podcast and YouTube channels, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be kept up to date on all of the DX activities. So here's a quick contest update. I know that the ARL contest sheet is read elsewhere in this podcast, and the contests that I mention are sometimes redundant. However, there are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or to get entities or zones in the log that they may otherwise be difficult to get. The contest to get ready for is the 2025 CQ Worldwide WPX contest. The CW portion will be held the weekend of May 24th and 25th. The objective is for amateurs worldwide to contact as many amateurs and prefixes as possible during that contest period. Only 160, 80, 40, 20, 15, and 10 will be used. Observance of established band plans is strongly encouraged. The exchange is RST report plus a progressive contact serial number starting with 001 for the first contact. The final score is the result of the total QSO points multiplied by the number of different prefixes worked. And with AJ8B, you can see why I enjoy this contest. I've always considered this contest to be the end of the contest season for me, so I like to hit it hard. Let me know if you are planning to operate and then how you do. on all of these topics. If you need any more details or have any input, please drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pileups. Have a great DX week.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a stream to your favorite digital device on Spotify, TuneIn.com, Overcast, iHeartMedia, and wherever you download your podcasts.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Since becoming a licensed amateur in 2010, I have spent a good amount of time putting together my thoughts on a weekly basis about the hobby and the community surrounding amateur radio. As you might know, my interest is eclectic, some might say random, but by and large I go where the unicorns appear. Over a year ago I mentioned in passing a community called AMSAT. The label on the box is Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation, which gives you a sense of what this is all about. It was started by amateur radio scientists who study upper atmospheric and space physics. More formally, the AMSAT mission is the, quote, continuation and extension of the amateur's proven ability to contribute to the advancement of the radio art, end quote. If you visit the AMSAT.org website, and you should, you'll discover dozens of universities and around 1,300 people, many of whom are licensed radio amateurs, who are asking questions and discovering answers that matter to more than just our amateur community. For the 8th time, the AMSAT community held an annual workshop, really an opportunity to get together and share ideas, in person and across the internet, a conference by any other name. Under the banner of AMSAT's Big Year, over 2 days, 56 people representing 27 different organizations across 61 sessions, tutorials, discussions, tours, posters and demonstrations explored topics all over our hobby, from the Personal Space Weather Network, capable of making ground-based measurements of the space environment, to the Whistler Catcher Pi, a project to record the VLF spectrum to 48 kHz using a Raspberry Pi. You'll find research into HF antennas for the DASI, or Distributed Array of Small Instruments project, and associated NSF grants, exploring measurements of HF and VLF combined with GPS and magnetometer across 20 to 30 stations. There's discussions on how to explore geospace data, such as information coming from the Personal Space Weather Station Network, or PSWS, using the Open Space Project, and dealing with the challenges of visualizing across a wide scale all the way up to the entire known universe. Did I mention that there's work underway to add PSWS-compatible receivers to Antarctica? There's reports on observations and modelling of the ionospheric effects of the April 2024 solar eclipse QSO party, including Doppler radio, HF time differences and medium-wave signal enhancements, not to mention planning and promoting future meteor scatter QSO parties. There's post-sunset sporadic F-propagation, large-scale travelling ionospheric disturbances, GPS-disciplined beacons, the physical nature of sporadic E-propagation, and plenty more. As you might have heard me say at one time or another, the difference between fiddling and science is writing it down. It means that you'll find every session has accompanying documentation, charts, graphics, and scientific papers. Remember, there's 8 years of reading to catch up with, or learn from, or play with. The Publications and Presentations section on the AMSAT.org website currently has 526 different entries. You might not be interested in the impact of radio wave and GPS scintillation or rapid fluctuation in strength caused during the G5 geomagnetic storm that occurred on the 10th of May 2024, or a statistical study of ion temperature anisotropy using AMISR, or Advanced Modular Incoherent Scatter Radar data, or you might. In case you're curious, anisotropy is the property of being directionally dependent. In other words, it matters in which direction you measure, which might have some relevance to you if you consider that we think of the ionosphere and radio paths as being reciprocal. If it reminds you of isotropy, that's because they're opposites. The point being that amateur radio is a great many things to different people. If you're a scientist, budding, graduate or tenured, there's a home for you within this amazing hobby. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
The ARRL has honored Phil Karn, KA9Q, with the Mary Hobart K1 MMH Medal of Distinction. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with all the details.
He was presented the honor at the ARRL donor reception on May 15th at the National Museum of the United States Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base near Dayton, Ohio. The annual event kicks off ARRL's activities around Dayton Hamvention. Karn is a graduate of Cornell University and Carnegie Mellon University with degrees in electrical and computer engineering and has retired from a technology career including Bell Labs, Bellcore, and Qualcomm. He is founder of AMPRNet. He is founder and past president of Amateur Radio Digital Communications, ARDC. That's a private foundation that exists to support amateur radio and digital communication science and technology through grants and scholarships and the management of 44Net. Phil continues to serve on the ADRC Board of Directors. The work of ADRC has contributed approximately $30 million back to amateur radio since 2020. Karn has been licensed since he was 15 years old. It's been a major factor in my life, directly and indirectly, he said. Karn views amateur radio as a creative outlet. I'm an engineer, so I need an outlet for my technical ideas. I'm retired, so amateur radio now fulfills that need. It's very gratifying to see others using your ideas and works, said Karn. Mary Hobart, K1 MMH, was ARRL's first director of development. She passed away in 2021. The medal named in her honor is intended to be given to those individuals or couples who have given the rest of our small community the inspiration to reach higher with their own philanthropic support of ARRL and amateur radio. Karn hopes that others follow his lead, contributing to the future of amateur radio. He says there's no real secret to being a leader, just participate. You can read more about our recipient of the 2025 award at arrl.org. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Karn's technical contributions to advance the amateur radio service drive his dedication to the future of education through ham radio. He envisions education having a greater role in amateur radio in decades to come. Ham radio has always excelled at individual self-learning, but it could do so much more. I'd really like to see the many technical tinkerers outside ham radio join us. I'd like to see much more amateur radio and formal education. AMSAT and many universities' small satellite groups are good examples, but there could be so much more. Hams will continue to create new technology, usually by working in academia and industry, but also as individuals, he said. The world is easier to change than you might think, but it takes time and persistence. When I was young, I often got frustrated by what seemed like sluggish change, but it will happen, even if you don't have much time for ham radio when you're busy with your career. Try to stay connected with other hams. Encourage your friends and family to become hams, attend club meetings and dinners. It will pay dividends. Attendees at the reception also heard a keynote address from Dr. Ed Snyder, W1YSM, about his ARDC-funded Marconi program, which promotes strengthening of amateur radio clubs by encouraging very active clubs to mentor or Elmer less active clubs. Marconi, in this case, is an acronym for Motivating Amateur Radio Clubs to Open New Initiatives. More information is available at www.arrl.org/Marconi.
Chinese researchers have developed a compact, high-performance antenna that can seamlessly integrate into modern stealth aircraft, enabling efficient communications and navigation without compromising radar invisibility or aerodynamic performance. As stealth capabilities and aerodynamic performance become essential, modern combat aircraft are being designed with flatter profiles to minimize their radar signature and improve aerodynamic efficiency. Currently, antennas as small as 5 millimeters can be built into the surface of aircraft. However, these antennas typically operate within a narrow frequency range around 2.32.5 gigahertz. Researchers from the Southwest China Institute of Electronic Technology and the University of Electronic Science and Technology of China have now introduced an omnidirectional circular ring antenna that's both ultra-widebanded and low-profile. Their work's been published in the Journal of Electronic Science and Technology. We propose an airborne ultra-wide circular ring conformal array antenna based on the typical tightly coupled ultra-wideband long slot element and traditional multi-saturation methods of omnidirectional antennas, said Professor Feng Yang.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Welcome to the 24th segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio. Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website in the production of these segments. Now sit back and relax with the next chapter of Ham Radio History. Armstrong in QST. At age 29 and already one of the most well-known radio engineers in the world, Edwin H. Armstrong was a veteran of the Great War and the president of the Radio Club of America. He was also professor of electrical engineering at Columbia University in New York City, where the RCA was based and met regularly. Later recognized as one of the most important inventors in radio, Armstrong embodied the close relationship between amateur experimenters of the early years and leading academic and commercial radio researchers. In Armstrong's case, they were the same person. His article, A New Method for the Reception of Weak Signals at Short Wavelength, led the February 1920 issue of QST. It described a new receiving technique especially useful to hams of the time who were struggling with how to make use of signals that suffered two afflictions. They were very short in wavelength and very weak. He had developed the method while in the Army during the war. Having presented the material at one of the RCA's regular meetings the previous December, he gave the ARRL permission to reprint it under the agreement with the League that dated back before the war to regularly publish such talks. You get a strange feeling reading an article such as this. Looking in from the 21st century, you know how the technological story eventually unfolds in the years and decades that follow. You can't help but empathize with one of the great minds of the time as he struggles to extend the boundaries of the radio art, on the verge of discovering a new solution, being held back by the inadequacies of the available equipment. Armstrong, an experienced author of peer-reviewed technical publications, concisely described a challenge that was of great interest to amateurs who wondered about the usability of wavelengths below 200 meters, the only direction for expansion available to them. His objective was to build a receiver that covered a wide range of wavelengths, 600 to 50 meters, was easily tunable, and faithfully reproduce the characteristics of the transmitted signal. This last requirement meant that the receiver must not distort the original modulation of an undamped signal, or if a spark damped signal, it should reproduce the original note, the personal sound of an individual transmitter. He explained that there were three usual direct methods of reception, none of which were satisfactory. 1. Rectification, detection of the radio frequency RF signal, as in a crystal set, followed by amplification of the resulting audio. 2. Reordering things to first amplify the RF signal, followed by rectification. And 3. Heterodyning directly down to audio frequencies. Heterodyning means mixing the original radio signal with another signal produced within the receiver, but having a slightly higher or lower frequency. This produces an audio signal with a frequency that is the difference of the two mixed signals. If the two frequencies are close enough, you'd get a frequency called a beat frequency that was low enough to be audible to the human ear. More broadly, heterodyning is combining two signals having different frequencies to produce two new signals, one of which is the sum of the two frequencies of the original signals, and the other is the difference of the two. Normally, only one of the resulting signals is selected and used. The other is filtered out. The technique is used in nearly all radio receivers today, including cell phones, to convert one frequency to another one. The reasons for doing so vary widely. Since rectification was inherently inefficient at low signal levels, the first approach worked poorly with weak signals, and weak signals were what you most wanted to hear, since the signals coming from the farthest distance would also be the weakest. To make things worse, low-frequency audio amplifiers in 1920 were inherently noisy, limiting how much amplification you could employ and how much useful signal you could get in the headphones. In the second method, rectification was more efficient with an RF signal that had first been amplified. However, inter-electrode capacitance in vacuum tubes confined their operation to longer wavelengths in simple circuits. If you added inductance to counter this effect, you would end up with a receiver that was cumbersome to tune and prone to internal oscillations. The third method, heterodyning to get audio, seemed to be the best alternative, but in 1920 it was impractical because of the instability of the beat note. Vacuum tube oscillators were quite unstable at short wavelengths, high frequencies, in both receivers and transmitters. Armstrong introduced an in-between approach, heterodyne the original RF signal down to a frequency he described as substantially above audibility. This was later called an intermediate frequency, or IF. In this case, 100,000 cycles per second, or KC, known as kilohertz today, then pass it through amplification and rectification. The big advantage of this method was a greatly increased rectification or detection efficiency made possible by a much higher signal level after amplification. However, to use this for CW undamped reception, one must somehow modulate an unmodulated undamped signal to make it audible, since the detected frequency would be too high to hear. Although not explicit in the article, it is reasonable to assume that by modulated reception, he was describing the use of modulated CW produced at the transmitter as the method to make undamped waves audible in the receiver. Even though a stable oscillator could be built for this lower frequency, using one to further heterodyne this intermediate frequency down to an audible one would not work, since the resulting note would still depend on the stability of the oscillator used in the previous heterodyne step. Once a desired operating frequency was chosen and tuned, he used 3 megacycles or 3 million cycles per second. The heterodyne signal, or local oscillator in today's terminology, could be adjusted for the most efficient rectification in the first stage, which, he wrote, was a non-critical adjustment. Of course, it was only non-critical and did not need to be changed if one intended to stay on one frequency. Selectivity could be improved if the amplification stage was made regenerative and the coupling between stages was tuned. As for spark, damped signals, previous attempts using heterodyning resulted in the loss of the signal's original note, the characteristic buzzy tone produced by the frequency with which sparks were produced. The signal's note was lost because the efficiency of rectification or mixing in heterodyning depends strongly on the phase difference of the two signals being mixed. In spark, each wave train, each burst of RF energy after a spark from the transmitter, typically begins at a different random phase angle or point in the sinusoidal wave. Thus, each wave train is heterodyned to a different random level. Also, since the audio frequency beat note is so low compared to the RF frequency in both the wave train and the local oscillator, there is no time to complete even part of one cycle of a beat note. Both effects result in a random hissing sound at the receiver when listening to a spark signal, difficult to listen to and decode, and difficult to distinguish from other nearby signals. With a much higher beat note, as is in his new design, several beats per wave train could be produced, and the phase difference would therefore vary through several cycles, and so the initial phase of each wave mattered much less. The note of the original spark signal was thus preserved. In fact, to the listener, the difference in the characteristic notes of individual transmitters was even more noticeable than when using a simple crystal detector. Armstrong goes on to describe other variations of this method of reception, including using multiple stages of different intermediate frequencies. The basic idea of using an intermediate frequency would become standard practice and have many subsidiary benefits in receiver design, perhaps only some of which Armstrong himself understood fully at this early point. More than 90 years later, these basic principles can be found in the design of a majority of receivers of all sorts, including cell phones and satellites, garage door openers, and wireless computer networks, not to mention actual radios and televisions. While acknowledging the work of others upon which he had built, he asserted that the application of the principle to the reception of short waves is, I believe, new, and it is for this reason that this paper is presented. That is, presented to the people who needed it most and prompted its development, his fellow amateurs. Though constrained by crude components, Armstrong was changing the fundamental nature of the radio art before his 30th birthday. Included in this material are quotes from the following: A new method for the reception of weak signals at short wavelength, QST, February 1920, page 5. Important announcement, QST, July 1916, page 157. With appreciation to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for permitting us to use his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions. In the preparation of this segment, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. If you are new to satellites or have dabbled in it a bit and have a question or are confused about something, a great resource is the AMSAT Bulletin Board. There you will find satellite operators that can answer your questions. There are many new operators as well as seasoned operators. I would venture to say that just about any question you have about working satellites, operating the radio, setting up your rotor, or tracking software, someone will be able to respond to your question. You can subscribe to the AMSAT-BB by going to mailman.amsat.org. Select AMSAT-BB and subscribe. An account is not necessary. Just enter your email address and press submit. You will receive a reply asking to confirm your subscription, and you're done. After that, you can post a question or answer by sending it to amsat-bb@amsat.org. Another very good source is amsat.org. There you can click on the Satellite Resources tab, and you can find out just about everything you want to know concerning current satellites, their frequencies, and if they are operational. There is even an online pass prediction software. Plug in your lat long and the satellite you would like to work, and passes will be returned for your location. Print it out and have it ready for your next satellite pass. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for the weekly propagation and solar weather forecast. After weeks of calm, solar activity is suddenly high again, with two strong solar flares erupting from opposite sides of the Sun. A coronal mass ejection was associated with a strong solar flare on May 12, but modeling shows the ejection passing behind Earth. The geomagnetic field has been at unsettled to active conditions. Another CME, associated with a filament eruption in the northern hemisphere, is expected to pass above Earth on May 17. Glancing influences will likely enhance the solar wind field during this time. The corotating interacting region associated with the large, positive polarity coronal hole in the southern hemisphere is expected to become geo-effective on May 18, which will further enhance the field. Radio blackouts were observed on May 12. There remains a 65% chance that M-class, minor to moderate level flare activity will occur through May 18 with a 30% chance for X-class, or strong levels during the same time due to the complex magnetic field within region AR 4087. The solar wind reflected influences from the coronal hole high-speed stream, originating from the negative polarity coronal hole in the southwest part of the Sun. So looking ahead, solar activity is expected to be predominantly low through the outlook period, with varying chances for M-class flare activity. No proton events are expected at geosynchronous orbit. The greater than 2 MeV electron flux at geosynchronous orbit is expected to be at moderate levels until May 28, and again on June 6 and 7. High levels are expected from May 29 to June 5 as coronal hole high-speed stream influences increase during this time. Geomagnetic field activity is anticipated to reach minor storm levels on May 28 to June 1 under negative polarity coronal hole high-speed stream influences. Active levels are likely June 2 and 6. Mostly unsettled levels are likely on May 18 to the 21st, as well as June 2 and 5. Quiet levels are expected on May 22 through to May 26. The predicted planetary A index for May 17 though to the 23rd will have a mean of 7.3. The predicted planetary K index for the same time frame will have a mean of 2.7, and the 10.7 cm flux for the same time period will have a mean of 122.1. The latest solar report from Dr. Tammy Skov, WX6SWW, can be found on YouTube. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the VOCAP Online for Ham Radio website.
Just ahead in radio sport this week on May 17th, the UNDX contest, that's CW and phone. May 17th and 18th is Majesty King of Spain contest, CW there. Also on the 17th and 18th of May, the Arkansas QSO Party, CW phone and digital. May 20th, the ICWC Medium Speed Test, CW. The RSGB 80-meter Club Championship, digital. That's on May 21st. And on May 22nd, the NAQCC CW Sprint. The March 24th through the 25th, the CQ Worldwide MPX Contest, that's CW. May 26th, the QRP ARCI Hoot Owl Sprint, that's CW. May 27th, the QCX Challenge, CW phone and digital. May 28th, it's the Phone Weekly Test, that's phone of course. And on May 29th, it's the RSGP 80-meter Club Championship, that is CW. And remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information in your area. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions, May 16th through the 18th, of course, the Dayton Hamvention in Xenia, Ohio. May 30th through June 1st, CPAC hosting the ARRL Northwestern Division Convention, that's in Seaside, Oregon. June 8th, it's the Breeze Shooters Hamfest hosting the ARRL Western Pennsylvania Section Convention, that's in Butler, Pennsylvania. And on June 21st, the Knoxville Hamfest hosting the ARRL Tennessee State Convention in Knoxville, Tennessee. And this reminder, the 2025 Dayton Hamvention is underway now at the Greene County Fairgrounds in Xenia, Ohio. Gates opened at 9 a.m. on Friday morning, and everyone is ready, including ARRL. We're in the Tesla building with an on-site crew to answer your questions and a great lineup of forums. You can make the most out of your time at the Dayton Hamventions with the free ARRL Events app. That app includes Hamvention's full program, so you can browse and schedule forums, preview the extensive list of exhibitors, and find affiliated events. And during the event, attendees can also use the app to follow other features for the hourly prize drawings populated by the Dayton Hamvention Prize Committee, and browse building and site maps. The app's available for Apple and Android smart devices. You may also access the web browser version, which is optimized for nearly any browser or other type of mobile device. Hope to see you there.
The Federal Communications Commission is set to discuss a groundbreaking proposal at its May 2025 meeting that could reshape the future of the Internet access from across the United States. The agency will consider a further notice of proposed rulemaking to explore the expanded use of the 12.7 to 13.25 gigahertz and 42 to 42.5 gigahertz spectrum bands for satellite communications, potentially unlocking new opportunities for satellite-based broadband services. This move signals a shift in focus towards space-based internet solutions as a viable alternative or complement to traditional terrestrial wireless networks. The proposal outlined in GN docket number 22-352, WT docket number 23158, and GN docket number 14-177 comes at a time when demand for high-speed internet is surging, particularly in rural and underserved areas where terrestrial infrastructure remains costly and challenging to deploy. By opening up these spectrum bands for satellite use, the FCC aims to foster innovation and competition in the broadband market, potentially enabling companies like SpaceX's Starlink, Amazon's Project Kuiper, and other satellite providers to deliver faster, more reliable internet to millions of Americans. The 12.7 to 13.25 gigahertz band, part of the KU band, and the 42 to 42.5 gigahertz band within the QV band are currently underutilized for satellite communications. The FCC's exploration of these bands reflects a strategic pivot from earlier proposals that prioritize terrestrial wireless services, such as 5G, in these frequencies. The agency now seeks to balance the needs of both terrestrial and satellite operators, recognizing the unique advantages of satellite broadband in bridging the digital divide. Companies like Starlink have already deployed thousands of low Earth orbit satellites, providing high-speed internet to over 2 million users globally. However, spectrum availability remains a critical bottleneck for scaling these services. The 12.7 to 13.25 gigahertz and the 42 to 42.5 gigahertz bands could provide the necessary bandwidth to support higher data rates and more users, particularly in densely populated areas where satellite signals often face interference. The FCC will seek public comment on technical and regulatory frameworks to ensure efficient use of the spectrum while minimizing interference with existing services. Stakeholders, including satellite operators, wireless carriers, and consumer advocacy groups, are expected to weigh in on issues such as spectrum sharing, licensing models, and environmental concerns related to satellite deployments. The FCC's May meeting will mark a pivotal moment in the evolution of broadband policy as the agency grapples with the challenge of meeting skyrocketing connectivity demands in an increasingly digital world. If approved, the rulemaking could pave the way for a new era of satellite-driven internet access, bringing the promise of universal connectivity closer to reality.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
It is time for AMSAT's satellite shorts from all over, and we begin this week with this. Along with the CubeSat simulator, the AMSAT Youth Initiative is another of AMSAT's efforts to bring students into the world of amateur satellites and radio. This year's AMSAT Hamvention booth features the first of a series of online courses intended to generate that interest. The Introduction to Satellite Meteorology courses provides students with the opportunity to learn the role that satellites play in the field of weather forecasting. Following the program's theme, Satellites in Space Help Us Lead Better Lives on Earth, the course appeals to students' inherent interest in Earth sciences. As the courses progress, they are introduced to the concepts of radio communications and eventually amateur radio. The free courses are available directly to students and their families, but teachers and youth leaders are also encouraged to use the courses as they see fit. Next, Scott Kelly, who was the first American astronaut to spend almost a year in Earth orbit on board the International Space Station, stars in Never Stop Dreaming, a minute-long film made by Goodnights as part of its Mission Dry campaign. The video was released by the nighttime underwear brand on National Astronaut Day, May 5th, which coincides with the event when NASA first learned that it needed absorbent undergarments for its crew members. Man, I Gotta Pee. Alan Shepard, America's soon-to-be first man in space, radioed to the launch control room from atop his Redstone rocket on May 5, 1961. Astronauts are helping to destigmatize a common childhood experience by pointing out the similarities between what some kids wear to bed and what explorers wear into space. And finally, the AMSAT website offers a comprehensive list of communications satellites, and supporting details was updated on April 27, 2025. This list is an excellent overview of FM repeater, linear transponder, and digital satellites, as well as re-entered or inoperative satellites. Each listing includes a brief comment about links to details about each one. Also, there are frequency charts for each type of satellite. Access the information from the Satellite Info top-level menu drop-down list, which also includes many other related choices.
2 days after the conclave of cardinals had elected Pope Leo XIV, amateur radio station HV5PUL, the Pontifical Lantern University, was on the air in Vatican City State in the heart of Rome, celebrating. The station's administrator, Luca Della Giovampola, IW0DJB, reported that traffic was lively on 20 meters single sideband and 17 meters FT8. He said that the simple 100-watt station logged an estimated 400 contacts in 4 hours. Propagation was changing, and so, with the exception of one Japanese station, all the contacts were within Europe. It's not often a new pope is chosen, nor that HV5PUL is put on the air. Lucas said the call sign is active mainly on Saturdays in connection with special occasions, such as the opening day of the university's academic year and, of course, the election of a new pope.
Amateur radio operator Bob Josewhite, WA3PZO, was a member of the 1980 Winter Olympic torch relay team that guided the Olympic flame from Langley Air Force Base in Virginia to Lake Placid, New York. He recently visited the Lake Placid Olympic Museum, which is celebrating the 45th anniversary of the 1980 Winter Olympics. Josewhite's main job during the event was to help coordinate communications along the 1,000-mile route. The communication challenges were described as the most difficult of the Winter Olympics, and amateur radio was seen as the only service to meet that challenge. Recently, Josewhite traveled to the museum to meet with his staff to review a large collection of torch run memorabilia that he donated. Bob also participated in a Touch the Torch program, in which museum visitors could ask him questions about the torch run, as well as hold a 1980 Olympic torch. He received an Olympic Appreciation Medal for his service. Josewhite is an ARRL member and holds an advanced class license. He served on the ARRL Public Relations Committee for over 10 years and received the ARRL Phil McGann Award in 1996. Currently, his picture and story are on display at the museum.
Tuesday, May 13th, 2025, was celebrated in and around Puerto Rico as Dia del Radio Aficionado, Amateur Radio Day. It's an activity that has been in operation for more than a century and has undergone different changes and advances over the years. In June 1996, the second Tuesday in May of each year was designated Puerto Rico's Amateur Radio Day. In honor of this year's event, a proclamation was issued by the Department of State and signed by Governor Jennifer Gonzalez that includes a mention of the 100th anniversary of the founding of the International Amateur Radio Union, ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, and the fact that there are more than 5,000 amateur radio licenses in Puerto Rico. The event received good publicity. The proclamation was distributed to social media, followed by a mention on WKAQ 580 AM, the first radio station in Puerto Rico on the air in 1922. The station's first general manager, Joaquin Augusti for Juliet Echo, was also the first radio amateur on the island. At 7:15 a.m., ARRL Puerto Rico Section Public Information Coordinator Angel Santana, Whiskey Papa 3, Golf Whiskey, was interviewed on WIPR 940 AM, talking about the occasion and the role of amateurs in emergencies. Later in the day, a special radio program aired on WRSS 1410 AM from the city of San Sebastian, hosted by ARRL Puerto Rico Section Technical Specialist Rafael Carrasquillo, Kilo Papa 4, Romeo Alpha Sierra, and included special guests Section Manager Carmen Green, Kilo Papa 4, Quebec, Victory, Quebec, and Technical Coordinator Ariel Negron, Whiskey Papa 4, Quebec Echo Charlie, who talked about their experiences in amateur radio. Special amateur radio nets were organized, offering electronic certificates for contacts made.
A session of the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology, or TI, is being hosted this summer by the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab in Laurel, Maryland. With more details on this special session of the Teachers Institute, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, at League headquarters.
This marks the first time a major research university has hosted the ARRL program. The TI program is expanding significantly in 2025. Already an institute was held on Staten Island, New York, to mark the first regional session. Sessions in Texas and southeastern U.S. are scheduled for later this year as well. Working with Johns Hopkins University as a result of ARRL Education and Learning Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, exhibiting the program at the National Science Teachers Association Conference in Philadelphia earlier this year. Representatives from the university saw Goodgame's presentation on the impact that amateur radio can have on the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM curriculum. This is a huge win. To have a name like Johns Hopkins interested in the work we're doing, said Goodgame. We are hoping to partner with them frequently to hold more sessions, license teachers, and inspire kids. Part of ARRL's mission is to inspire the next generation of radio amateurs, but the TI takes it further, Goodgame added. This isn't just about getting a group of teens licensed. It's about making young people think about how radio and wireless technology impact our world and integrate into the industrial landscape of tomorrow. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology is funded entirely by donations to the ARRL Education and Technology Fund. Learn more about this program at www.arrl.org/TI.
Ted Randall, WB8PUM, host and founder of the QSO radio show heard on shortwave stations WTWW and WRMI, passed away on Sunday, May 11th, after a long illness. Born Ted Randall Klimkowski in Dearborn Heights, Michigan, Ted graduated from Robichaud High School in 1969. Ted was a broadcast engineer in Detroit and later Nashville. His sons David and Matt are also engineers. Ted was known for his deep voice and velvety delivery on the QSO radio show. If it was of interest to amateurs, Ted covered it. He also covered the paranormal. He said, if it flies over your head and can't be identified or goes bump in the night, we talk about it. He did several live shows from just outside the gates of Area 51 in Nevada. During his live broadcast from the Huntsville Hamfest, the QSO radio show was usually the first stop after the presentation for a sit-down on-air with Ted. He also did live broadcasts from the Dayton Hamvention as well. The Amateur Radio QSO show offered radio amateurs an opportunity to tell their stories, share their life experiences in amateur and shortwave radio, and featured guests who have ties to the amateur community. Former CQ magazine editor Rich Mosenson, W2VU, recalls the show brought ham radio to the broader audience of shortwave listeners, frequently broadcasting live from major hamfests. One of my favorite things to do was to join in his annual hotel lobby roundtable at the Huntsville Hamfest, where Ted would gather 5 or 6 leaders in the hobby and industry, pass out microphones, and we'd talk about all sorts of ham radio topics. It was fun to do and fascinating to hear so many perspectives. Ted will be missed. Klimkowski held an amateur radio general class license and in 2009 was awarded the ARRL Bill Leonard W2SKE Professional Media Award. Funeral arrangements are pending. For several years, the Ham Nation television audio was simulcast by Ted on WTWW. He is survived by his wife Holly and 2 sons. Fittingly, he was 73 years of age.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
October seems like a long way off, but the planners of the 43rd Annual AMSAT Space Symposium and Annual General Meeting, it's just around the corner. Organizers have already sent out a save-the-date notice for the weekend of October 16th and have published a general schedule that runs for 4 days. Meetings and presentations will be hosted at the Holiday Inn and Suites, Phoenix Airport North in Arizona, convenient to Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. The Board of Directors will meet on Thursday, the 16th of October, and again on Friday, the 17th of October, the same day that the symposium presentations will begin. The annual general meeting will be on Saturday, the 18th of October. The morning of Sunday, the 19th of October, the closing day, has been set aside for the members' breakfast. More specific details will be made public as soon as they become available.
Amazon launched the first 27 satellites for its Kuiper broadband internet constellation on Monday, marking the start of its long-anticipated challenge to SpaceX's Starlink network. The satellites lifted off aboard a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, or 2300 UTC, from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida after an initial launch attempt earlier this month was delayed by weather. The launch is part of Amazon's $10 billion Project Kuiper, which aims to deploy 3,236 satellites into low Earth orbit to deliver global broadband service. Unveiled in 2019, the initiative targets consumers, businesses, and governments, a customer base already served by Starlink's rapidly growing presence in the satellite internet market. The service is also being positioned as a vital solution for rural and underserved areas. Amazon's Kuiper program has experienced more than a year of delays, pushing the inaugural deployment well past its original target of early 2024. Under a Federal Communications Commission mandate, Amazon must launch half of its satellites constellation, which is 1,618 satellites, by the middle of 2026. Analysts expect the company may need to seek an extension due to its late start. All 27 satellites from Monday's launch are functioning normally, according to Amazon CEO Andy Jassy, who confirmed the status on social media nearly 7 hours after liftoff. The confirmation marks a key milestone in the project. Amazon expects to begin customer service later this year, assuming deployment and testing continues to be on schedule. Amazon could launch up to 5 additional Kuiper missions in 2025, according to United Launch Alliance CEO Tony Brewer. The company has indicated that initial service could begin with as few as 578 satellites, enabling limited coverage in northern and southern regions, with global service expanding as more satellites are deployed. Amazon's experience in consumer products and cloud infrastructure is seen by executives as a potential advantage over competitors. SpaceX, which has launched over 8,000 Starlink satellites since 2019, currently leads the market with more than 5 million users in 125 countries. Despite SpaceX's head start, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos remains optimistic about Kuiper's future. There's insatiable demand for the internet, Bezos said in January. There's room for a lot of winners.
Dubis, a magazine that is popular with amateurs around the world who focus on VHF and higher frequencies, is posing a challenge and offering a reward. It involves a little radio detective work. The International Ham Radio magazine for enthusiasts operating VHF and up has announced it will award a prize this year to a radio operator studying the scientific validity of global passive whisper radar in locating aircraft. The theory came to prominence following the use of whisper log data in the search for the doomed Malaysian flight MH370, which disappeared in 2014 en route to Beijing. The journal, which publishes 4 times a year in English and German, has created this award to mark the 75th anniversary of the Dark and the 100th anniversary of the International Amateur Radio Union. The total prize award is €7,500. the equivalent of $8,450 US, and is in 3 categories: €1,500 or $1,600 for proof involving large passenger or cargo aircraft, €2,500 or $2,800 for proof involving smaller aircraft, €3,500, almost $4,000 for proof involving helicopters. Studies should be submitted in either English or German and in PDF format by the deadline of the 31st of December. That email address is dubis@t-online.de.
The grand opening of the newly constructed Camp Greeno amateur radio station is scheduled for Saturday, May 31st, 2025, beginning at 2 p.m. The station, located in the basement of the Ma Shop Lodge at Yarmouthport, Massachusetts, is the culmination of efforts by members of the Barnstable Amateur Radio Club. The club received an ARRL Club Grant Award of $25,000 in September of 2022 to partner with the Cape and Island Boy Scout Council to build, install, and operate an amateur radio station. There were also contributions from many local businesses and the Cape and Island Council leadership. The station will provide an opportunity for scouts to experience and learn about the excitement of amateur radio. Volunteers from BARC will be providing radio merit badge training and amateur radio licensing courses on an ongoing basis. Organizers believe that today's amateur radio is a mix of cutting-edge computer technology and broadcast engineering, which offers a chance for scouts to get a start on a science or engineering career. All amateur radio operators and the public are invited to the event. Contact Barnstable Amateur Radio Club for more information.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, your amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air, available as a podcast on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartMedia, and Spotify.
Hi, I'm Terry Saunders, N1KIN, one of the anchors for This Week in Amateur Radio, and I have a few questions. Do you have a good radio voice? Do you have a quiet recording space, own a professional broadcast microphone and DAW software, and know how to use them? Can you commit to a same-day turnaround when given a script assignment? If you answered yes to all of these questions, and you're willing to volunteer your time to give a little something back to the ham radio hobby, then lend us your voice and join our anchor team for This Week in Amateur Radio. To learn more and see if you have what it takes, contact George Bowen, W2XBS, via email at w2xbs77@gmail.com or look him up on qrz.com.
And finally this week, if you're a volunteer examiner, you will appreciate this story. A record number of candidates showed up to take Bangladesh's amateur radio exam on Friday, May 9th, a total estimated at more than 900 participants. The Amateur Radio Society of Bangladesh said on its website that this remarkable figure represents the highest number of participants ever recorded for an amateur radio exam in Bangladesh's history. Weeks of preparation had gone into preparing candidates for the exam by offering online seminars as well as in-person training and workshops. There was also a field day, as well as classes in basic electronics and antenna building. The Amateur Radio Society said there was great support from the Bangladesh Vespa community, a community service group of motorized scooter enthusiasts, many of whom also took the exam, which was organized by the Bangladesh Telecommunication Regulatory Commission. It was not yet known how many of the candidates were successful in getting their license.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard all around the world on the amateur bands, and on great repeater systems like the KB3 CNN Gateway FM Association repeater, on 146.730 MHz every Tuesday evening at 7:30 p.m., covering the wide area of western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. If your repeater system carries This Week in Amateur Radio, let us know via email, and we will mention your station in an upcoming edition. Send your information to w2xbs77@gmail.com.
Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you would like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and all our news team around the world, this is Will Rogers, K5WLR in Fayetteville, Arkansas, wishing you 73.